All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start a song. We're going to start a session. So we're going to click on create a new session and we're going to get this dialog. You'll see here we have two tabs, styles and user. Because I had user open before, you'll see when I click on this, it will open up and it'll be on the user tab. So we want it on the user tab and we want to select the voice work punch and roll template.
Okay.
Okay. So that's very important. Sometimes people forget to do that and then they're like, it doesn't look anything like when we practiced. That's because you need to make sure you select the template. Otherwise, like, let's just create an empty song so you can see what that looks like. This is what an empty song looks like. Look, it's both very busy and completely useless at the same time.
Right.
Okay. Okay, now I'm going to use a shortcut here. You see these shortcuts up here, start and song. If I hit start, go back to the start menu, and I can create a new session here. The other one's still open, so I can have multiple open. I'm leaving it, the other one open just so we can go back and do some comparison later. But so we've got our template selected. We can give it a name. I'm just going to call it session 1. By default, it's going to go into the songs folder. You'll see document Studio One songs if that was extended out. So you don't have to change that or even write that down. That's just where it goes.
Oh, okay.
And we'll walk. There's actually a cheat sheet in that folder I shared with you earlier that explains the folder structure. I encourage you to download that and review that. Okay. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff we don't have to change. We're just really giving it a name. A lot of people ask me, do I need to care about the song length? You don't, because who knows how long a chapter is going to be. It could be 2 minutes long. It could be an hour and a half. We will make an adjustment for that once the recording is done. But you see, so if I hover, it says the initial length of the song or the session rather than the final length. Okay. All right. So I'm going to click All Right, and it's going to open up our recording session. So now what we've got is we've got a single track, and you'll see this green signal that's jumping up and down that says, hey, I can hear you. If you don't see that, that means for whatever reason it's not hearing you. Okay? Great. And okay, so now I'm going to walk you through the user interface. There's a lot of stuff on here. Most of the stuff does not apply to us at all.
Oh.
Okay? Which is helpful. So I'm going to start here. We're just going to talk about the track because you haven't really used recording software. Studio One is pretty typical in terms of how it lays things out. However, if you haven't really engaged with recording software before, a lot of this is going to be new. And so if I come across as pedantic, you can shut me down. But I'm going to try to keep it I try to keep things kind of fairly straightforward. I'm going to really teach you one way to do things as opposed to 3 or 4, because my goal is that you can actually use it when we're done.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So this is called a track. If I pressed record, which I'll just do real quick, it's going to just record on that track. Okay, we'll stop that. To the very left, we have what they call a notes panel. If I double click in here, I can type notes to myself about what I recorded here. Some people like that. I tend not to use it, but it's there if you want it. And I included a little note to you as part of the template.
Oh, okay.
Then if you click right here, I can select a different color for the audio on the track. That's really a personal preference thing. But I want you to know that it's there in case that's something that's important to you.
What did you click to get to the different colors?
See this gray bar right here?
Oh, okay.
So if I click on that and then go to green, because it's St. Patty's Day. Well, that mint color, it's perfect. We'll leave it there for today. It clashes with this green.
Yeah.
Actually, that's going to bug me. We're going to have to change that.
It's a little, I don't know why it's bothering my eyes.
Well, let's go back to gray.
There we go.
Yeah. And you can also change the overall theme of it if you want to. That's a bit in the weeds. We're just not going to worry about that. Just to the right now, we have, I call this the track header because it's got most of your track information on it. It says it's track number 1. All right, I have these 4 buttons. The first one is mute. What that means is if I press play, I can't hear it. That makes sense.
It's going to.
Okay. So if you're not hearing anything, make sure mute's not pressed. If you press M on your keyboard, it will mute it.
Oh, okay.
That's a shortcut you're not going to use very often. In fact, what will happen, play and stop are both the space bar. People will accidentally fat finger and they'll hit M as opposed to the space bar.
Oh, I see.
Go ahead.
Should I be writing all this down? Like,
well, we're recording it, but some of these things we're going to cover a couple different times.
Oh, that's true. We're recording. Yeah, that's true. So,
yeah. That's okay. It's a good question. Right next to it is S for solo. That's not really important to us. If I was recording a 36-track song and I wanted to just listen to guitars, I would use solo to mute everything else.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So we're really not going to use these two. The way I try to, I encourage people to record 1 chapter per Studio One session. Mm-hmm. Sean will do 8. He'll record a chapter, go to another track, record another chapter, go to another track. It makes editing a little complicated, but it's very efficient if you don't have to do any of your own editing. Sean doesn't do any of his own editing. You're gonna have to do your own editing initially, and so stick with 1 song, 1 track per session, which is why you don't see any other tracks here. There's just 1 track. The one that Sean uses has 8 tracks in it. It opens it up. There's 8 tracks. 1's ready to go. Oh. So these 2 we're not really going to use. This is. You heard that?
Yeah. Is that my microphone? Or?
Yeah, I'll explain it. So if this is not pressed, you're not recording. So you see that there's not that line's not jumping. Mm-hmm. So that means that even if I press record, it's not going to capture anything because this is not. We haven't said, yes, use this track for recording. Now, what you heard was the monitor, which allows you to hear what's coming, to listen as you are speaking, so you can listen to your own performance. Mm-hmm. There's usually a slight delay for many people. Most people, that's actually really distracting. And by default, if you press this button, it's going to turn the monitor on. So I'm just going to turn that off. There we go. So now you don't have to remember that. So now I can press that button and we're fine.
Okay.
But if I turn this one on, we'll get that screechy sound that no one likes.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of fun.
All right, so let me just recap this real quick. The stuff that's really important here, make sure that button is pressed. That's really the only thing that we care about in terms of what's going on with the track. Just make sure that's pressed. If you do want to change the name, you can just double click on that and give it a different name.
Do you use headphones or headsets?
It depends on how I feel. My space is pretty good. I need to be able to hear myself during punch and roll, during the pre-roll, which we'll cover. I need to be able to hear those 2 or 3 seconds of audio so I know when I should punch back in after I've made a mistake or after I've taken a break. Okay. So oftentimes I'll have earbuds because they don't have to be high quality when you're just narrating, and I'll leave one out so I can hear myself in my space, but I can also hear the pre-roll. And I find that gives me a nice balance of hearing my performance in that space and also hearing what I need to do.
Okay.
I hear little people in the background.
Yeah, my daughter's playing ball.
Cool. Good for her. I'll be doing that later outside with Sam.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous here. 61 or will be 61. Right now it's 41.
It's nice out here too. It's colder, but still sunny.
Yeah. Let's get some vitamin D, kill the germs.
Yes.
All right. So that's what's going on with the track. We'll come back to the track later because this is where we do most of our work. But we're going to come and drop down to look at the busiest area of the interface down here. This is where people get really intimidated However, there's almost nothing that we need to do down here.
Oh.
The first thing I'm going to show you actually is right here, moving from right to left. This is called the metronome group. It's labeled. If I click on that wrench, it brings up metronome setup. The reason I show you this is right here. This is the key to punch and roll. We have a pre-roll, which plays back a designated amount of audio before it starts to record. Right now it's set up to play 1 second. I'm going to set 3 for you.
Okay.
The reason I want you to know about this is if you choose a longer or a shorter pre-roll, you just press that wrench and you could change it to 2. Okay. Now, the other thing you'll see, pre-roll is checked. You see right here that red button. That's also pre-roll. So if I click that, it's an indication that pre-roll is not on or is on. So it should be red so that we know the pre-roll is working. Okay. But this wrench will take care of both of those things.
Okay.
Oh, that's...
So you said, what was pre-roll again that you said? It's a recording before.
Sure.
You or what? I'm not sure I understand that.
Well, that's okay. We'll come back to that. Because pre-roll is really one of the core conventions of punch and roll.
Okay.
So we'll absolutely come back to that. Now I'm going to scoot all the way over because we get to ignore everything until we get to this menu, from this round dot to that triangle. They call this the transport menu, and quite simply because the transport menu takes you places. Okay, so if I, right now you can see blue, which means stop is selected. So if you grew up like me, then you know what most of these buttons are just because you had a cassette recorder when you were a kid, right? You had a Walkman with the auto reverse. So if I hit play, it will play. If I hit stop, it will stop. If I hit record, it will record. So those 3 things are not a mystery. I tend to not use these buttons. Instead, I use the space bar to play and the space bar to stop. And then we'll set up a keyboard shortcut here so that to record, you just need to press the letter R. So even though I'm showing you this down here, I actually don't use these buttons, and I encourage you to learn the keyboard shortcuts. A lot of what we're doing is trying to build efficiency. As an actress, a lot of what you're doing, what I do as an actor is try to remove those barriers between myself and what my performance is going to be, to get rid of distractions so that we can be involved in our performance and not worried about logistics and those things. Same thing here. We really want to get to the logistics dialed in to the extent that we can just narrate. We can tell a story and not worry about what the software is doing.
Right. Okay.
Okay, moving over, you'll see this, which is called return to 0. It has one function. It moves your cursor back to the 0 point.
Okay.
That's all that does. I do use that on a regular basis. If for some reason I'm in the middle of narrating something and I want to go back to the beginning, I can just hit that button.
Okay.
Okay. Now there are 2 more. Well, I'm going to show you these 2. These are fast forward and rewind. Guess what they do? Okay.
Fast forward and rewind. Yeah.
So if I press it down, it's going to fast forward. If I just barely touch it, it's going to fast forward based on how long I press down. Okay. Then I have these 2 individual triangles. These, it says go to previous marker. What this is really doing, it's like on your DVD, if you want to skip to another section or another scene in a DVD, that's what it's doing. So if I click on go to next marker, it's going to jump up. I only have 2 markers. There's end and start. So it jumps between those. I very seldom use these, but I want you to know they're there. And it's actually part of what I want you to know is that there's a marker track.
So you can you'd have to set your own markers, and then that button would be used to go to those markers that you've set already.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get rid of that marker. So you can add them here with the plus or the minus, the plus sign. will add a marker in a given place. I use those occasionally. I used one yesterday when I was doing an audition because I got to a name in the audition that I didn't know how to pronounce. And rather than stop what I was doing, I placed a marker and came back, did some research to figure out how the name was pronounced, and then re-recorded that section. Because when I'm in the mode where I'm in the groove of performing, I don't want to shift the right-left brain to go out and do research and then try to get back into my creative brain to perform.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's the marker track, and that's what these two buttons do, is jump back and forth. I don't use those very often, but they're there. And this tells us where the marker, where our cursor is. You can see it's just over 2 seconds. I click here. Oh, my face is there. Okay.
No,
that's all right.
Okay.
So you can see as I'm clicking on this time ruler here, that the cursor is moving, and down here you can see that updates accordingly. So if I typed in 53 and hit enter, or 52, it's going to take the cursor and place it at that point. So that can be useful as a reference. And if I wanted to hit 0 and take me back to the beginning, it'll do that.
Okay.
So let me just go back and cover what we talked about here, just so we can kind of keep that in focus. If you ever need to adjust how long your pre-roll is, it'll be there in the metronome group. Start, stop, and record. Keyboard shortcuts that you'll use. Fast forward and rewind, and jump to markers. All right. Okay. Now I want to go up to this time ruler. Do you use a mouse, or are you going to use the touchpad?
I'm going to be using the touchpad.
Okay. So what I would like you to do is, instead of fast forward and rewind, what I'd like you to do, oops, let's do this. Hold on. There's some tools up here we'll talk about, but what I want you to do is put 2 fingers on the touchpad and then swipe left and right. So do you see how if you swipe right to left, it's like you're pulling the audio to move forward, and if you go left to right, it takes you the other direction?
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of using fast forward and rewind, I would suggest you use that. It's more intuitive, and you can do that. The idea is we don't have to find the exact button to do fast forward and rewind. You can just use the gesture to move around that way.
Okay.
Okay. Now, moving up to the time ruler, let's say I've recorded a lot and I kind of want to see, I want to zoom out a bit so I can see more of that.
Yeah.
So with the mouse cursor over the time ruler, just pull down with 2 fingers. So you're zooming in. Now push up to zoom out.
Whoops.
Oh, you probably clicked. Yep. So
so don't click.
No, just a gesture. So just kind of 2 fingers, and don't press down very hard. Just kind of push up. Yep, you're doing it. Yep.
So that's expanding it, and then it's condensing.
Yep.
Okay.
So those are those gestures of left and right to fast forward and rewind, and then the gesture 2 fingers up or down on the time ruler are going to be things you're going to use on a regular basis. So let's say for some reason I wanted to get out to about 2 minutes in. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to zoom out, and then I'm going to place my cursor at 2 and zoom in. And that's a really fast way to kind of get to where you want to be in your recording. So that's something I'd like you to practice. It'll be important, and then at some point it will become just intuitive. So that's just what you do.
Okay.
So, but those are there's a keyboard shortcut job aid. Excuse me. You think, well, you're my 3rd session today, so I'm a little tired. But that's there's a job aid that's in that folder. If you download that, it'll explain some of the key shortcuts and gestures that you can use.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay, so we've talked about what's down here. Now I'm going to come up to the top and cover a few things here. Not a lot that we really need to know. What you did see me do is this was selected and I moved over and selected this instead. You have a group of cursor tools here, and we want this selected, this bracket tool. And that gives you two things that you can use, the arrow tool and the range tool. All the arrow tool does, let's unselect that, is allows you to click on something and move it around.
Oh.
Okay, so that's how we grab these little bits of audio. Studio One calls those events. If we recorded again, we would have two events. In fact, we'll just copy this. Let's duplicate it. Forgot that I'm dealing with. There we go.
Okay.
So I just made a copy of that, and I've got, two events now.
So wait, how did you make a copy? I'm sorry, I looked away for a second.
That's okay. Well, that's not super important, but you just copy.
Oh, I see.
Yep, and then you can, and then we'll paste it here, and it just drops it in for you.
Okay.
Okay. So
you do all that with the touch. You don't have to use a mouse. The reason I ask is because I only have one USB port, and if I've got my mic plugged into it, I can't have my mouse unless I get a wireless mouse, which I might do, but mine broke.
I understand. You can also get a for not very much, maybe less than $10. You can get a USB expander that gives you 4 ports, so that you can make the most of that. My MacBook has 2 USB ports, and I usually need 5.
Oh, okay.
Right. I've got my microphone coming in through the interface. I've got keyboard, mouse. I've got a hard drive is for backup storage, and then one just in case I want to plug in something. I want one extra just in case. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So those are really, it's like a USB hub. You can get them on Amazon for less than $10.
Oh, okay.
Worth having, so that you can expand that out. I also like the way gestures work. I think they work with Studio One really well. To be able to scroll back and forth with 2 fingers and zoom in and zoom out with those same 2 fingers is really intuitive. Okay. So this is the arrow again. It allows you to just grab and move things. The range tool is kind of similar, but instead of just grabbing, you get a crosshair, but instead of just grabbing this whole thing, I can say, I want to grab that thing.
Oh, okay.
And if I had more than one of these, I could grab across. So if we pasted, hold a second here, let's paste that back in. So I could grab this and go over the top and grab both of those. So it's helpful from an editing standpoint. We're not really going to get much into editing today because that gets into the weeds a bit. We're really just trying to record. If I select this bracket here, what this does is it gives me the arrow at the bottom and the range tool at the top. So as soon as I go over this halfway point, you see how it changes?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what that's intended to do, is it gives you 2 tools. If for some reason you accidentally hit like the number 4 or 5 or something, hello, how are you?
Say hi.
You don't have to.
She's a little shy.
And let's keep it that way. I have a daughter. She's going to be 26 this month. I wish she was more shy. All right. So we'll move this back over. But if you ever see any of these other things highlighted, just come right back and make sure that this bracket is clicked.
Okay.
Okay. Then we're going to skip everything else, and we're going to come over here, and we're going to look at a couple things. The first is this button here. It's called Auto Scroll. That should be turned on. Occasionally it will turn as my face again. It'll turn itself off. Give me a second to make one small change here. So if if I hit play, you'll see that the cursor kind of follows along as it goes across the page. If this is off, even though I'm still playing, you can see down here it's still playing. The cursor is gone. The cursor is taken off. Turn that back on. Oh, there's the cursor back where I can see it. So if for some reason your cursor goes off the screen, you can't see it anymore, just come up and press that button. This here is called cursor follows edit position. This one's a little hard for me to explain. You don't have to listen carefully. This doesn't have to be on, but I find it's helpful that if I start to clean, oh, I lost your video. Was that intentional?
Oh, I think you accidentally hit the no camera button.
Okay. Well, that's okay. Actually, I'm going to oftentimes I'll shut off my video for the sake of bandwidth, but I think we're okay.
Okay.
In fact, I'll shut off mine. You leave off yours, I'll leave off mine.
Okay.
So, I hear feet. I hear feet.
Yeah, she's running.
This just makes it easier to place the cursor if I have that turned on. So just, you're probably not going to notice if it's not on. If you see that it's off, go ahead and turn it on. You will not notice a lot of behavior difference. It took me about 2 years of using it to actually understand what it did, because I didn't care that much, because it didn't affect what I was doing enough for me to do anything about it. Then there's two others here we're not going to spend any real time on, but ripple edit is an editing function that can be very useful when it's time to do pickups, but we're not going to play with that today because we're not doing pickups today. And snap means that if, let's say I have two pieces and I want this to connect to that one, I can drag it over and it will go wank. You see how it's like a Lego just went snapped right into place there?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, if that's off and I bring it over, it won't snap into place. I'll have to kind of drag it over. Yeah. So it's easier if the snap is on, because I can just go, as soon as it gets close, it's like a magnet going bang right in there. Again, these two here are more focused on editing. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do much in the way of editing today. So let's just recap up here. There's really only a couple things we care about. Make sure that bracket is selected, and make sure these two are selected. Otherwise, not much we need to worry about. Now, I know we talked a lot about a lot of different things, but ultimately we're going to spend almost all our time right here using stop, start, and record. That's almost everything we're going to do. All right. I'm going to set some keyboard shortcuts up for you now, because those make things quite a bit easier. The first thing we're going to do is set up record. You don't have to remember how I do this, but you can watch it just for the sake of understanding how it works. Would you press R on your keyboard for me? Cool. And let's do set start and end. If you would click the letter A. Right. Oops, I'm sorry, let's not do select Q.
Q? Okay.
Yep, my bad, I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, and let's do, I got out of sequence there. This should be A.
Okay.
Cool, so we got that. Someone's trying to call me. Let me just make sure I don't know who they are. I don't, so we'll hang up on them, because it's somebody who mistakes me for my dad, who's not with us anymore. They want to sell me cremation services or something, because that's not tacky at all.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, delete time. So just below the escape key, you'll see the accent mark. If you would press that. Great. And then...
So that was for delete, or no? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll cover that. It's something called delete time. And then the kind of flip side of that is insert silence. So if you would hit shift and then the same key, you'll get the tilde mark. There you go. Very good. And I think I spelled that wrong. I did. Duplicate track. Hit T for me. And we're going to do one more. Well, two more, really. Data zoom in. Press the up arrow for me.
Up arrow? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Great. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do, I'm sorry, make that shift up arrow.
Oh, shift, okay.
Yeah, my bad. Good. And then make this shift down arrow. Great. So we'll click apply and close that. All right. So now we're ready to play with punch and roll. So this is where we're going to talk about the pre-roll. But the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm just going to have you read anything for about 30 seconds, just so we have some audio to kind of play with a little bit. So do you have anything, piece of paper or something on your phone? News story about COVID-19, for example.
Yeah, let me look at my news. Or I've got, yeah, let's see. Sorry, I'm looking for my news link. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right, should I just go ahead and read?
Well, what I'd like you to do is when you're ready, to press the letter R, which will begin recording.
Okay.
Give it about, wait about 4 or 5 seconds, because that'll give us a little bit of room tone, which isn't important to what we're doing now, but in the future, you're going to want a little bit of room tone there. So just press R, and after about 5 seconds, just read until either you make a mistake or until you get to about 30 seconds.
Okay. All right. So I'm not practicing. I'm just going to go to it, right?
That's correct. Yep. Right.
All right. Here we go. The Trump administration expressed support on Tuesday for sending direct cash payments to Americans as part of a massive economic stimulus package of around $850 billion, which the White House hopes could stanch the economic freefall caused by the coronavirus. We're looking at sending checks to Americans immediately, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said Tuesday at a briefing, and I mean now in the next 2 weeks. The White House's support of this idea, which has won backing from Democrats.
Okay, go ahead and stop.
Okay.
Okay. So that hesitation there. So hit the space bar. Excuse me.
Oh, space. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. These are habits that you'll develop. So as soon as you make a mistake, even if it's a hesitation or just I didn't quite read that the way I wanted to, with punch and roll, you want to stop immediately.
Right.
And then we want to find that mistake and we're going to fix it. So in this case, we went a little over. So I'm just going to place the cursor. We can zoom out. This might be a place where we'd zoom out and kind of see, well, what have we recorded? Right here, over is probably where I started to talk and went, wait, let's stop. Let's listen. Okay, so that hesitate. Okay, so there we go. So that's me. Let's see.
The White House's support of this idea, which has won backing.
Okay, so right there is where you made a mistake. Okay, so we're gonna zoom in, and with punch and roll, what we're doing is saying, as soon as I make a mistake, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to pick up and record from the point of the last correct phrase. So our last correct phrase is here. Now in the next 2 weeks, Okay.
Okay.
So we know the first thing we do, we stop, and then we figure out where was the mistake and where do I need to put my cursor to start to record again. Now what I'm going to do is we'll zoom in. I'm going to place the cursor. I'm going to do this for you this time. I'm going to put it right here at the end of that last correct phrase and before that breath.
Okay.
Okay, because you are like most people. Most people, when they start to record, they take in a breath. And then as they get into a rhythm, they breathe at the end of the phrases to prepare them for the next phrase. So I place that cursor right here at the end of that last correct phrase. If I place it over here, just before the mistake, what would happen is I'd have a breath here, and because you're going to breathe before you start to speak, we'd have the two-hump camel, because you'd have another breath right here. So you'd have da-da-da-da, and then again.
Yeah, we
right?
don't want that. Yeah.
We don't want that. So we really want to get right here so we can go ahead and get rid of that breath. There's nothing wrong with the breath. Breathing is inherent to living, and it's also inherent to long-form narration. So we don't remove breaths unless they're really distracting.
Okay.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press R to start recording, and what it's going to do is it's going to jump back about 3 seconds, and it's going to play 3 seconds of that last correct phrase, so that you can hear what your tempo of performance was, how loud your voice was, where you were at in terms of frequency. Were you speaking in a lower part of your range or a higher part of your range, so that you can match that as you come back in to continue recording. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But what did you say does that? What function or what button?
Well, I'll show you. I'm just going to press R for record. And because we have the pre-roll set up, it's going to jump back 3 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's going to be a little weird at first. So I want you to find, and I'll go ahead and be your engineer. I'm going to press record when it's time. But find in what you were reading, the phrase that you want to pick up from. Do you remember where that is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to press R. And as soon as that last correct phrase is finished, go ahead and continue to read as if you were just continuing from that correct point.
Okay.
You'll figure it out.
Day at a briefing, and I mean now in the next 2 weeks.
The White House's support of this idea, which has won backing from Democrats and some Republicans in Congress, shows how fast talks are evolving. President Trump had initially supported a payroll tax holiday, but said Tuesday that would take too long to deliver relief to Americans. Payroll tax is one way, but it does come over a period of months, many months, Trump said, and we want to do something much faster than that. So I think we have ways of getting money out pretty quickly and very accurately.
Okay, let's stop. Oh, good. Well, you hit stop at the same time I did. Okay, that's right. Now, which is great. I'm glad you stopped. You didn't make a mistake, but there are 3 reasons why we stop when we use punch and roll. One is we made a mistake. The second is it's a good place to take a break, have a drink of water, clear out our mouths, whatever. Or 3, we finished the chapter and we don't have to record anymore. So I'm glad that you stopped. Now I'm going to go back and we're going to look at where you punched in. This is not something we'd normally do, but I just want you to see how it sounded. One thing you may have noticed is that it seemed to cut off your words just before it recorded. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
And what that is Studio One saying, oh, you're getting ready to record. I'm going to read this to you, but I'm going to stop just before that so that the audio doesn't carry into your recording.
Okay.
So if we listen to it, you can see where you punched in.
At a briefing, and I mean now in the next 2 weeks.
So in that case, it did cut off a little bit.
Support of this idea.
We lost. Did you notice we lost the S?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this.
So you could just drag it out. Okay.
My mouse isn't. So you see that it's right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the next 2 weeks.
So we want to delete that dead space a little. Is that?
We can. Normally, once we get used to it, we don't have to. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use, remember I set up a thing called data zoom?
Uh-huh.
So I'm just using shift up arrow here so that I can see this a little better. And there's I think a little bit of that breath is there. Let's see. No, that's just the S. So we're good. So if we did want to get rid of some of this space because it feels too long from a pacing perspective, then we can grab it using that range tool. And remember we set up a shortcut for delete time?
Oh yeah, what was that, the accent?
Yep. Go ahead and press that.
Did it work?
Yep. So I'm going to undo it so you can see what you did. Go ahead and do it again. So it removed it and shuffled everything to the right. To the left. If I just deleted it like normal, you'd see there's a big gap there, which is silence, and that's not good. But by using delete time, it just scooches it over for the sake of pasting. Now, I showed you that, but once you get in the hang of punch and roll, you're really not going to be making any adjustments for pacing. What most people do when they first start is they go, oh, well, I need to make sure I watch the screen so I know it's recording. That's one of those barriers to performance that you'll get past, where you're like, I know how the pre-roll works. I'm just going to hit record. And once I see that the last correct phrase is done, I will start in where I would naturally begin my performance. So we're going to go to the end here of what we were recording. This is maybe not the fastest way to do it, but that's how I'm doing it right now. I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to place my cursor right before the last correct phrase and prepare to pick up and record again. Before we do that, I like to tell people there's really 3 primary reasons why we want to do punch and roll outside of the fact that Sean said you had to, right? The first is it makes editing a lot easier. So if you don't stop with every mistake, this is what my brother does, drives me crazy because he also does voiceover. He doesn't use punch and roll, doesn't want to because he's a stubborn jackass. But he records, so he'll have like maybe a 10-minute thing to record. When he makes a mistake, he just keeps going. He just re-records that and then goes back and removes the bad reads. That means he's spending a lot of time going back to clean things up.
So what is he doing? Like splicing the correct recordings back into the recording?
Well, let me give you an example. I'll read this AAA thing that's in front of me. You're an important part of our 100-year legacy of serving and advocating for our local communities. So he just rereads the phrase the correct way and keeps going, and then he goes back through and cuts out.
Delete out. Oh, okay.
It takes a lot of time. So punch and rolls actually saves us a lot of time because we aren't dealing with those by having to go back and clean those things up. We're trying to be efficient. There's not many people making money hand over fist in narration. It's one of those tools that we have in our arsenal as performers. It's like, okay, I'm not doing anything right now. I don't have a TV show or stage show or whatever, but I want to keep performing. I can make money doing this. The people who are doing it make a good living, but nobody's rich. Maybe Scott Brick is rich. He might be. I don't know. But part of what we want to do is make sure that we're efficient, because the more that we can produce, the more income that we have from it. If it takes us a long time to produce something, we're not making any more money by spending more time on it. Right. So efficiency is really important. So the first thing we get out of this, pardon me, is efficiency. The second thing we get is a better performance, because you have the reference to your, when you do that pre-roll, you hear, what was my pacing? What was the pitch of my voice? How loud was I, etc. And it sounds like one continuous performance. If you've heard a well-recorded audiobook, it sounds like the narrator did it in one take. Whereas if you listen to one that's not recorded very well, not using punch and roll, you can tell there's variation in phrases that doesn't sound like a continuation of what I heard. It sounds a little quieter. It sounds a little louder. It sounds like it was a different performance. We want it to sound like one continuous performance. Yeah. The third thing is at the point where most of us are endeavoring to work at the highest level. We want to work with Blackstone and with Random House and some of the big publishing houses. And to get to that point, you have to use punch and roll. If you're not using punch and roll, they won't take your audio.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So this is the reason why Sean has people do this and has come to me is he knows that for his students to be successful, they need to know how this works.
How did he find you, by the way?
One of my friends is a guy named Don Barnes, and Don is kind of the guru of Studio One coaching. He was my mentor for a while, and he still is, for that matter. And Don was in Africa doing some work, and Sean was having trouble. He had just moved to Studio One, and he was having a major freak out because he couldn't figure out how something worked. So Don put me in charge of monitoring the Studio One group while he was gone. And I saw Sean have his freak out. And so I reached out to him and we talked and I fixed his problem. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to start sending all my folks to you.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm like, okay. But the thing was, I wasn't coaching at that point. I was just a guy who was using Studio One. And would, and advise people through the Studio One group. Oh, you need some help with that? This is how that works. And so it was like 3.5 or 4 years ago. He started sending people, but he didn't warn me first. And at some point I went to him like, what are we doing here? He's like, I told everybody they have to come to you first. I'm like, okay. That would have been good to know ahead of time. So that's and we've become friends, and we meet up when he's out in the Portland area. But that's how we found each other, and he continues to send people my way, and all he asks is that when people come to work with me that they get a discount, which they do. So they get the Sean Pratt referral discount when they work with me.
Nice.
Yeah, it works out. I think it works out well. I enjoy coaching, not as much as I enjoy narrating, but coaching is fun. Anyway, so let us practice a little bit more, if you don't mind, because I want you to get the hang of this. Okay. One of the toughest things to figure out for some folks, it's not really difficult, it's more about intuition, is how to find the point where we're going to place the cursor and then to get back into it. Some people pick it up right away and other people fumble around a little bit, but this is where we have to use the swipe left and right and zoom in and out, and then placing the cursor. So I'm going to help you out real quick. I'm just going to figure out where we're at, and then I'm going to have you pick up and do this next one on your own.
Money out pretty quickly and very accurately.
So I'll stop right there. I'm going to place the cursor at the end of the phrase, and when you figure out where you're at, press R and jump in.
Okay. So you don't want me to delete anything, just start recording?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, great. All right.
Of getting money out pretty quickly and very accurately.
Some lawmakers, including Senator Mitt Romney, have discussed direct cash payments of $1,000, which Romney and Mnuchin discussed Monday night. That's one of the ideas we like, Mnuchin said Tuesday, without endorsing a specific number. Mnuchin will discuss details with Senate Republicans later Tuesday. The package would be mostly devoted to flooding the economy with cash, officials said, with some $50 billion directed specifically to helping the airline industry.
Good. Now, you didn't make any mistakes, and that's fine. I know one thing I did notice is that your approach to the microphone was a little different. Well, maybe it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Hold on a second. I forgot I was data zoomed in. So let's zoom out and see if we have some consistency. I'm looking at your wave file to see, you can see shorter, a little taller, but this is about the same.
Okay, right, yeah, I was probably a little closer. Okay, yeah.
So that one of the things that I encourage folks to do in terms of mic placement, I'm going to turn my camera back on, we'll go here, is the hang loose sign, if you're familiar with that.
Okay, yeah.
So one, don't touch your mouth. Thumb at your bottom lip. Pinky is where the microphone should be located. Okay. So that's about the distance, 5 to 7 inches. And so when you sit down to record, make sure that you just kind of line it up so that you have consistency that way.
Okay, great.
All right, hide my face here. Okay, so you recorded that and didn't make a mistake, so you're going to pick up again.
All right, so we're going to keep going?
Yep, I want you to, now at this point, I want you to go until you make a mistake.
Okay, keep going until I make a mistake. Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
All right, let me see, where was I? Okay. All right, so here we go.
First directed specifically to helping the airline industry.
White House officials also want to include more assistance for small businesses and their employees in the legislation, the official said. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations. The talks have taken on more urgency as the economy has shown signs of careening into recession. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell almost 3,000 points on Monday and showed signs of a slight rebound on Tuesday. We're giving relief to affected industries and small businesses, and we're ensuring that we emerge from this challenge with a prosperous and growing economy. Because that's what's going to happen, Trump said at a there.
Good, perfect. Okay, so you made a mistake. Now I want you to figure out where your punch point's going to be to fix that mistake.
Okay. Let me see here. Okay, so it was, whoa, what just happened?
Well, you have to hit stop.
Oh.
Yeah, so go ahead and scroll back.
Okay. Whoops, did I scroll too far? I did, didn't I?
Yep, that's all right. What you're doing is your cursor is, yeah, there you go. You're getting there. So use your 2-finger swipe to go through. Now, is your cursor on the time ruler right now?
Uh,
It doesn't need to be. It's
I
better
don't
if it's
think it
more.
is.
Okay.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
so go ahead and.
Let's see if I can.
White House officials
Oh,
also
okay.
want to include more assistance for small businesses and their employees in the legislation, the official said. The official spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations. The talks have taken on more urgency as the economy has shown signs of careening into recession. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell almost 3,000 points on Monday and showed signs of a slight rebound on Tuesday. We're giving relief to affected industries and small businesses, and we're ensuring that we emerge from this challenge with a prosperous and growing economy. Because that's what's going to happen, Trump said at a
Okay.
So we're in. So yeah, why am I not? If I want to get back.
So go ahead and swipe back a little bit so you can expose a bit more. And it looks like you're up in the time ruler. So not up. Yeah. So drop down. When you're in the time ruler, it'll do the zoom thing, and we're trying to go left and right.
So how do I get out of the? I'm sorry, the time ruler.
No. So make sure your cursor is right around down here, and then use your swipe left or right.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Keep going. And I can see that's the P. Go back a little further than that.
Oh, keep going?
Yep. Because I'll just show you real quick. So right here is where you started with the P. Okay. Yep. So we need to find another space that looks like this, but before. Because I know that this was the first press conference. Right? That's your first mistake. These are things you'll get used to seeing. But we're going to keep coming back. And then we see, there's a good space right here. That's probably the beginning of the phrase that had the air at the end of it. So if we click here and listen.
That's going to happen, Trump said at a press.
So we'll stop there. So we've confirmed that. So again, this is the one that's the art piece of it, right? Is you'll begin to be able to read these waves and know, there's a space there that's probably between phrases. That's a good place to jump in and record. So I helped you with that one, and I'll let you go ahead and pick that up again.
Okay, so I'm not deleting it?
No, you don't have to delete, because when you record, it'll record over the top of it.
Oh, okay.
Right. That's part of what the punch and roll is you're punching in and recording over the top of a mistake.
Oh, okay. All right. So now I just got to find out where I want to re-record. Okay. Let's see. The official spoke on condition. Okay. All right. So just go whenever I'm ready?
Yep.
Okay.
From this challenge with a prosperous and growing economy.
We're giving relief to affected industries and small businesses, and we're ensuring that we emerge from this challenge with a prosperous and growing economy, because that's what's going to happen, Trump said at a press briefing Tuesday with the government's coronavirus task force. It's going to be big, it's going to be bold, and the level of enthusiasm to get something done, I don't think I've seen anything quite like it. The $850 billion package would come in addition to another $100 billion plus package passed by the House that aims to provide paid sick leave, unemployment insurance, and other benefits for impacted workers, though some details of that legislation remained fluid as it moves through Congress. But there is emerging tension between the White House's approach and the bills Democrats are trying to advance. White House officials are leaning hard into the idea of tax cuts and industry assistance, while Democrats have said their proposals are focused more on helping workers, healthcare providers, schools, and senior citizens. Mnuchin would like to see the new package pass the Senate by the end of the week, he told senators Monday evening in a meeting at the Capitol. Speaking on the Senate floor Tuesday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he anticipated urgent talks later Tuesday with Mnuchin on the emerging package, which McConnell said should provide direct aid to workers and families, help for the economy overall, and in particular, All right.
Good. Okay, good.
So I think, it was in particular that I was just didn't sound right there.
Yep.
And I think I I repeated. So when I started recording, I started from the beginning of that paragraph, which maybe I didn't need to do. So I repeated one of the sentences, I think.
Well, we'll go back to that. But
Okay.
first, I want you to find your punch point so that you would know where to pick up that mistake, because that's going to be a real key for this working well for you.
Okay. Oops. So how do I hear it again? Just press play?
Yeah, now you've gone back too far.
Okay.
At this point. So what I would do at that point is zoom out a little bit so you can, because right now you should be almost at 3 minutes. So go ahead and zoom out until you can see most of it.
What is happening here? I'm like.
One of the things that might be easier for you in terms of zoom in and zoom out are keyboard shortcuts W and E.
Oh, okay.
So if you hit W, that zooms out. Keep going, because keep hitting W.
Oh, keep hitting it. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so now you can see we're up there about 3:30 or something. So now you can go ahead and place your cursor over in that vicinity. Make sure you're clicking on the top. Remember how it splits in two? So make sure you're clicking at the top half of that to place your cursor. If you click on the bottom, it selects the whole thing, and that's not super helpful. And my guess is you'd want to be right around 3:25, somewhere thereabouts.
Okay, let me move your.
Oh yeah, move my face. Yeah.
So let's see, 3:25, about right here.
Now go ahead and hit E to zoom in. And go ahead and play from there, excuse me, and see if that's about right.
The emerging package, which McConnell said should provide direct aid to workers and families, help for the economy overall, and in particular.
Okay, it was right there.
Okay, so now that's a pretty long phrase. So you may be able to punch in just slightly before that. So go ahead and use W to zoom in so we can get a better view of the waveform. You can hit it a few times till you get to a good perspective. Keep E for to zoom in.
Oh, E to zoom in. Sorry.
Right,
like
that's right.
Zooming out.
Yeah. Okay, so right about 3:19. Do you see there's kind of a space there?
3:19. Here?
Yeah. So go ahead and zoom in there a little bit.
Okay, so zoom. That's E.
And there's a little bit of a breath there, but that's probably where you're going to want to punch in. So press the space bar just to see if that's the beginning or a good part, like a comma in the phrase. If it is, just hit the space bar to stop.
Help for the economy overall.
Yeah. So go ahead and place your cursor back there. That's a good punch-in point.
Okay.
Because what we're looking for is a comma or a semicolon or a period, or just a natural break and flow. We don't want to try to jump in the middle of a complex sentence that doesn't have that. But it looks like you took a breath there, which suggests it's probably a good punch-in point. So now go ahead and press R. Make sure you know where you're at in your text and pick up.
Okay. I'm just trying to find where I was.
Yeah, no, that's a big piece of it.
Okay, here we go. Okay. So it was help for the economy overall. Okay.
McConnell said should provide direct aid to workers and family.
Help for the economy overall, and in particular, small businesses, and more assistance for the public health system and medical personnel. It's my intention that the Senate will not adjourn until we have passed significant and bold new steps above and beyond what the House has passed to help our strong nation and our strong underlying economy weather this storm, McConnell said. Senator Marco Rubio said aid to airlines was likely to be included. We still need to get people around the country. I have no doubt that's going to be a major feature of the next step. It's unclear how warmly the design of White House...
There you go. Okay. So you get kind of the sense of what the flow of this is. You read, you make a mistake, or there's something you don't like, jog back a little bit, figure out where you need to, where that mistake was, and start to record again. And then you'll end up with one continuous phrase when you're done. We're getting short on time, and I have another session after this, and I want to make sure that we cover a couple more things.
Okay.
I will say you're going to have to practice, because that's what, that's how we get better at things. I usually suggest that folks, open up a new recording session each day and record for 15 minutes just to familiarize yourself with the mechanics and make them feel more natural. So what you're finding is I need to zoom in, I need to zoom out, I need to jog back, I need to place the cursor. There's a whole bunch of these things that they're going to just feel foreign, which is fair, and that's the way that it works. But the more time you spend with it, the less foreign it seems. When I first started using this stuff, I was so, going back maybe 15 years ago, I was so anxious about using the software that I'd get started. It would take me about an hour and a half to get things set up the way I wanted them to. I record something, and then the next time I came back, it might be 3 months later for whatever reason, and I had no idea what I was doing before.
Right.
Because I wasn't practicing. So I want to encourage you to jump in, play around a little bit. There's really, at this point, there's nothing you're going to screw up because nothing is on the line. So it's a matter of play around a little bit, make some mistakes, and explore what you can do. I'm going to be sending you an email that's going to have a short list, 4 or 5 things that I want you to do for practice. And it'll also include a link so you can set up the check-in session. But our goal is to get you to the point, because Sean's going to give you some homework. He's going to want you to record a 20 to 25-minute sample for him. We want you to feel comfortable enough in Studio One that you can do that without challenges. Just basically knock it out. The last thing I'm going to show you, and there's a cheat sheet job aid on how to do this up in that folder. But when we're done recording something, we need to export it. And to do that, we're going to follow a process that Studio One calls a mixdown. Again, this is all detailed in the job aid. It'll actually walk you step by step through it. I'll talk you through it so you can see what it looks like. The first thing we're going to do is tell Studio One what audio do we want to export. In this case, we want basically everything up to here. So we set up a keyboard shortcut with A to select everything on the track. So all I did was press A to get that. And then I'm going to set my start and end markers. Remember, we had a 5-minute song, and now we want a 3-minute and something second song. So I'm going to press Q, another shortcut we set up, that snaps the start and end to the selected audio.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm going to do that again. So I hit A to select all. I'm going to press Q to snap that.
Okay.
Okay. Now I've told Studio One that's what I want to export. I go to Song and Export Mixdown, and we get a dialog. 4 quadrants here. We give it a name, a format. We'll do an MP3 this time. Now I'm going to set this at 192 kilobits because I'm doing that now. You won't have to do it later. It'll just remember that was our selection. Between start and end marker, because that's what we set, and export. There's 2 outputs here. One's called main and one's called export. Just use export, and it'll go cool. And it's going to dump it out and open up a folder called Mixdown. So there's our, it's right back here, first try. So if we play that.
The Trump administration.
We've got our audio.
Great.
So let's try that again just for fun. Move this over here. Make sure the track is selected. We're going to hit A for select all, Q to set the markers, export. First try V2. We'll do this one as a WAV file. You'll see between start and end marker are already set for us. That's already set. And it goes whoop and done.
Great.
Okay, so that's what we're covering today. I know it's a lot. You've tracked pretty well with it. We got a couple more minutes. Did you have any other questions that are going to be barriers to you practicing?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess I like these shortcuts because I think that's going to help me a lot rather than like kind of using the touchpad, all the time. Like, I mean, I'm sure I'll use both, but I think the shortcuts are super helpful.
Okay. I'm a keyboard shortcut person myself, so I have a tendency to use those first. I try to just teach people one way to do it, but if the keyboard shortcuts are better for you, those zoom in, zoom out shortcuts are on that shortcut cheat sheet that'll tell you how to accomplish that.
Yeah, and then so when I'm punch and roll, essentially, I don't really have to delete anything. I can just re-record over the spot where I made the mistake.
Exactly.
That's essentially what we're doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's good for now. I will let you know if I have questions. So we set up a second session.
Right.
Okay.
I'll send an email, and one of the things in that will be a link that says, here's how to set up your next session. So it'll do this. Usually I use Can You Meet, but I'm just switching over to a different service. But it'll just say, what do you want to do? And it'll be a Studio One check-in will be one of your choices. Mm-hmm. What day do you want to do it? And it'll tell you if I have any sessions open. And then you can just grab a session. Usually I suggest give it a couple of weeks, explore a little bit, make some mistakes, write down your questions. So then we come together and spend that half hour in the follow-up. You've got everything in front of you, so you're not going, oh, what was that one question I was going to ask?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? You'll have that. And obviously, I'm happy to work with you more beyond that, but I just want you to know that half hour is something that you'll have already paid for after I send you an invoice that's already included in that. And you avail yourself of that.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And you've got my email, so if a question pops up, ask me. There'll also be a link to the Studio One Facebook group that Dawn runs. I don't participate in it very much, but it's a great group, and people are super helpful there, and we'll jump in if you have questions if for some reason I'm not available to help you out.
Oh, great. That's really good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get practicing and then set up. Are Tuesdays good for you generally or ever? Or I didn't notice very many Tuesdays on your...
Oh, I've been doing a lot of business travel. Because I have two jobs. I'm an IT consultant for public agencies, government agencies, and I do that. I own my own company for that, so I do work from home, and then I coach. And so someday, I think I've been traveling quite a bit lately. But there's no days that are off limits other than weekends, and it's 8 to noon Pacific time is what I leave open. If I already book somebody or I have another meeting or something, it won't show up. So you probably saw Tuesday, and I was just traveling. So next Tuesday is probably fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, but we should wait 2 weeks until, well, I can schedule it now, but then for at least 2 weeks in the future.
You can do it whenever you want. If you want it, some people wait 2 days. So do it whenever you want. Just make sure that you've invested enough time in it and given yourself a chance to get better, to learn. It's that learning is going to stick better than me showing you over and over, because you're at that point you don't have that tactile experience.
Right, I get it. Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to disconnect from your computer. So that link